Hi, this is Benoy Thanjan, your host of the Solar Maverick podcast, and also the founder and CEO of Renewable Energy. Renewable Energy, we're a solar developer and consulting firm. We've developed more than 100 megawatts of solar projects across the US, and we help clients execute clean energy projects with confidence. We act as your owner's rep, overseeing developers, EPCs, and financing partners to de-risk your project and keep it on schedule. We also provide development as a service, supporting origination strategy and execution so you can advance projects without building a large internal team. On the renewable energy credit side, we offer REC brokerage, REC asset management, and custom renewable energy credit research, helping clients understand pricing, policy shifts, and long-term market dynamics. In addition, we provide new market analysis and financial modeling to evaluate opportunities, assess project viability, and support investment decisions. To learn more, reach out at info@reneuenergy.com. That's info at reneuenergy.com. We'll also have information on the notes of the podcast as well. Let's get into it.
We actually built Scout IQ out of frustration. We needed to build Scout IQ for two things, right? So we were frustrated with our lack of bandwidth and our speed of learning. Prior to Scout IQ, our team would spend 2 months on a single land campaign, pulling GIS layers, cross-referencing landowner information that was often wrong, checking zoning ordinances, and going to the post office and literally sending out mailers. Most importantly, our team was spending their time running to the post office, like I said, painstakingly stuffing envelopes when they could be talking to landowners face to face.
Hello and welcome to the Solar Maverick podcast, where solar meets entrepreneurship and experience. I'm your host, Benoy Thanjan, so let's get into it.
Hi, this is Benoy, your host of the Solar Maverick podcast. I'm excited on this episode of the podcast to have Nobel Chang. He's the co-founder and CEO at Palladium Energy. Actually, he was on the podcast almost 4 years ago in March, and I'm excited. They're actually just released a press release on March 11th. Palladium Energy opens Scout IQ to power infrastructure developers. It's amazing on the pre-interview to learn about Scout IQ and the capabilities of this AI platform. And I'm excited to focus in talking about this press release and the great work that obviously Palladium Energy is doing. Nobel, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for talking about this press release first on the Solar Maverick podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the pod. 4 years is pretty wild that we, have known each other for that long. It's nice to be back on the podcast, though. Appreciate you having me here to talk about Scout IQ.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm excited to have you, and it's amazing to see how much thought leadership and podcasts that you've been on since that time and articles and things like that. So I really appreciate you doing that. Can you tell our audience, if they're not familiar, like what is Palladium Energy? What's your role? And also to talk maybe about like Scout IQ and how that is now part of what you're doing at Palladium Energy.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds good. Palladium Energy, we're a utility scale solar and solar plus storage developer. We've also gone into different power pathways such as standalone, BESS, and data center projects as well. We founded the company in 2019 and have done projects ranging from large mega scale projects in Texas to, standalone storage projects that we're working on now in the Carolinas, and have done some DG projects in Pennsylvania as well. We're funded by a private equity firm out of Philadelphia called Ultra Capital, and that allows us to get our projects that we get from Greenfield and take them all the way to NTP, and then we sell them to IPPs from there on. So that's a little bit about Palladium. A little bit about me maybe is helpful. I've been in the solar industry since 2009, have developed projects in every single market in the US, and done some projects also in Mexico, Chile, Argentina, Japan as well. At Palladium, I focus a lot of my efforts on the business development side, everything from greenfield origination to M&A activity to a lot of the market strategy, and it comes from my group as well. I'm also the quasi CTO. I built Scout IQ from scratch 100% on my own, with the help of AI, of course. And what it does is amplifies our greenfield development team, right? Since we've launched Scout IQ It's helped our team acquire 2.7 gigawatts of projects, and that's with a team of 3 people, right? So before we used to painstakingly manually do all the work, but from a technology perspective, we've applied a lot of leverage and built a lot of automated workflows that helps takes us all the toil out of the greenfield origination process. And we have now packaged Scout IQ up in a front end that we are now opening up to power infrastructure developers to engage us on a DSA basis so that we can help them acquire projects as well. So that's a little bit about Palladium, about me, and about Scout IQ.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear. I mean, you're the original Solar Maverick. You've been in development since 2009. We were talking about before, how things have changed, but still, obviously the things are still the same. And it's amazing that you created Scout IQ, obviously from scratch. And can you talk about like how you were able to do that? Maybe too, like what got you into data center development? Because it's interesting because I'm noticing too, like landowners asking me, hey, instead of solar or storage, can you do data center development? Yeah, I mean, I have so many questions, but I guess we'll start off with those two.
Yeah, sure. So your first question was, how did I build Scout IQ?
Yeah.
Maybe take a little bit of a step back because I've been in AI and tech automation for as long as I can remember, right? So when
Mm.
Tim Ferriss came out with his book, I started
Well,
automation and outsourcing to, the Philippines to help automate the work, right? And then,
yeah.
when Zapier came out, when Make.com came out, I started to do a lot of these no code drag and drop automations. And obviously, and with the release of AI in the past like 3 years, I've been playing with it. That has really accelerated our ability to create automations to help amplify our team, right? So the our ability to execute now has been, greatly leveraged, 10x, if you will, by the use of technology, right? So we primarily use Claude to power our automations, use it to build everything too. And, kind of the way that we think about, building automation is like, what is the next constraint that we need to relieve before it opens up? So this is the theory of constraints, right? So if you think about most businesses, we operate in a funnel system, right? So the top is how many leads you get, the bottom is how many can you qualify, and so on and so forth, right? So we solve the smallest constraint first, and that opens up everything, right? So if you solve one constraint, open that constraint by 10%, your ability to execute is magnified down that funnel. And so we continue to do that. Every single week we release new features to help our team automate that and open up those funnels. And that's how we got to the 2.7 gigs that we actually acquired in the past like 12 months. So that's the answer to the first question of like, how did we start to build this thing? It's a lot of solving real world development bottlenecks. And then your second question is, how do we get into the data center world? I think most renewable developers are doing this as well, right? So our ability to execute data center projects comes from our DNA, which is we're a nimble power infrastructure developer. Our team has done wind, solar, biomass, natural gas projects in almost every single RTO in the US. And we've seen complex projects get built. We also don't shy away from very difficult development. We actually lean into challenges and difficulty because we know coming out from other part of it, there's a lot of success that comes from, doing the hard work, right? So we got into the data center development world probably about 18 months ago. We recently sold our first data center project in Virginia. So we're really excited about that and want to continue to contribute to the space.
Yeah, definitely. I really appreciate you explaining that. It's really interesting, all the different changes with Palladium since we last spoke. Can you talk about like how, the biggest frustration in what traditional development processes that led you to develop, Scout IQ, this, AI driven acquisition and development engine?
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually built Scout IQ out of frustration. We needed to build Scout IQ for two things, right? So we were frustrated with our lack of bandwidth and our speed of learning, right? So prior to Scout IQ, our team would spend 2 months on a single land campaign, pulling GIS layers, cross-referencing landowner information that was often wrong, checking zoning ordinances, and going to the post office and literally sending out mailers, right? So Most importantly, our team was, spending their time running to the post office, like I said, painstakingly stuffing envelopes when they could be talking to landowners face to face, right? Because, that's what closes projects, not data, not machines or AI, it's people talking to people, right? And then secondly, we needed to create this because, we believe that we were getting market feedback at a really slow pace, right? So we think about learning as compounding effort, right? So the faster we're able to learn, the faster revolutions that we have, our land campaigns, the stronger our team becomes. And so, those are the main frustrations that actually was able to help us come up with the idea of Scout IQ.
Yeah, definitely. That's really helpful. I appreciate like the high level. Like, how would you explain Scout IQ in simple terms to a developer or IPP? And what makes it different from other AI or data platforms? I know you talked
Yeah,
about this a little bit.
yeah, for sure. So, Scout IQ, you could think of us as an execution as a service company that augments your greenfield acquisition siting team, right? So you engage us, we execute the work, right? Performing GIS analysis, we gather landowner contact information, we send hyper personalized targeted offers to landowners, and we negotiate those agreements end to end, right, to close. So we handle everything in the greenfield siting process. At the end, you get a project that has been diligenced by our AI agents, that our team has laid eyes on, our development team who has actually seen projects get built. We look at those projects when we apply development intuition into those as well, and we actually get you projects, right? So we also get access to our AI agents that we've built to help within the development aspect of it. One being real-time intelligence that helps you project pipeline stay more resilient, right? Because we in real time monitor planning and zoning ordinances, moratoriums, community sentiment, and changes to property tax abatement incentives. So, that is Scout IQ in a nutshell. How we are different than other providers is, we're not a SaaS company. We don't feed you data. Other folks in the industry get data better than we can, but they stop at a certain point where then your team needs to execute. We are the ones executing for you.
Yeah, definitely. That's huge. I mean, you're executing on their behalf with all your experience. And then obviously, as you know, like permitting interconnection, those are some of the biggest bottlenecks that we're seeing, other than obviously federal legislation and then obviously in certain states as well. So if you're able to expedite that through sentiment, right, and all these other things, it seems like there's a
Yeah.
lot of tools in the market right now, at least.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of tools in the market. Another thing that I would say is different about Scout IQ is that Palladium actually uses Scout IQ on a day-to-day basis. And so we are solving real world development bottlenecks that we are facing as a team, taking projects to NTP, right? And like in the end, that's what matters, getting steel in the ground. And we do all that we can to make sure we build tools to help the team to execute really, really well.
That makes sense. So really, like, they're not subscribing to a platform. It's essentially they're basically partnering with the co-development arrangement, right? With Palladium, and then Palladium's using Scout IQ as one of the resources, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do and how we engage with our partners currently.
Yeah, that's great because obviously all the other platforms are, like a subscription or software as a service. So I appreciate you explaining that. And can you walk through like how you went from identifying a target market to reaching out to landowners in just 3 days? I mean, that seems obviously really quick.
Yes, yeah, for sure. It's very, very fast. And it didn't used to be just 3 days, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
typical land campaign, in the industry is about 6 weeks, right? 6 weeks of pulling all this information in and all of that, and then sending out mailers there, right? So we cut it down from 6 weeks to 4 weeks to 2 weeks, and now we're at about 3 days, right? So to walk you through like how we do this, right? So it goes in, three main steps, right? So the first one is site selection, two is the campaign build, and then three is automated outreach, right? So the first step is once we have a campaign target, say for example, 200 megawatt projects in ERCOT South, or 400 megawatt data centers in Southern Virginia, those kind of like campaign parameters. The team inputs that into our campaign engine. It searches through parcels in the background and presents the best candidates that have gone through our 127 screening criteria, right? So all these projects We get to see everything from the obvious ones, transmission, floodplains, wetlands, all the way to down to if the if there's quicksand on site or not, right? So all of those are filtered. We know what everything looks like. Even actually it takes screenshots of the land for us. So when our team gets it, it's fully diligence projects that are 85% buildable, and we believe that they should be the best candidates in the campaign. Step two is a campaign build, right? So this is when the campaign engine goes to search for landowner information, right? This is like where most data sources fail, right? So it's impossible for one data source to surface the correct information. What we have built is what we're calling like enrichment waterfall, where it goes through multiple data sources, cross-references each of those data sets, and then surfaces the highest probability, landowner information. It's slightly scary, but it works very well. We use it all the time. We used to get probably for 100 mailers, we used to get maybe 15% return to sender just because mailing addresses are not correct. But now we're at like a 2% return to sender rate. So now step three, the final step of this is the campaign engine where we hyper personalize each mailer with a tailored offer to the landowner. These are not postcards or generic mailers. These are says their name, map of their address, map of their property, and tailored offers to them for their property. And so those are kind of the three steps that we go through. Again, it's site selection, campaign build, and automated outreach.
Yeah, definitely appreciate you explaining that. And I know in the pre-interview, you mentioned that there's a 25% landowner response rate, which
Yeah.
seems like extremely high based on, my experience sending out mailers to landowners. Why do you think your approach is so effective compared to like the traditional method?
Yeah. And I could distill this down to one piece of feedback our landowners continually tell us. So we get this all the time. Every quarter, we get this, a few landowners give us call back and said, Palladium is persistent without being annoying. So right. So seriously, we get that all the time, right? So
Yeah.
it's obviously the technology takes us to a point where we're really quick, we can respond fast, and we
Yeah.
get the right information in the landowner's mailbox, right?
Yeah.
But our system and our outreach methodology is based on the, I don't know, 17 years that I've been in the industry, our rapid learning process, like our team's intuition, plus all of the data that we have that we continually understand our markets, right? There's seasonality where North Carolina likes to get, more mailers, in the beginning of the year and at the end of the year, but not in the summer, right? Things like that we built into our campaign engine. So,
Mhm.
I think what we work really hard to do is build in developer intuition into our automations.
That makes sense. And then what's really interesting is you mentioned how like Palladium was able to scale from hundreds of megawatts to now multi-gigawatts of projects under contract or LOI with such a small team, a team of three people. Can you talk about like how you're able to do that?
Yeah, and I think about this quote often and runs my life by Archimedes, right? It's on leverage. It's give me a lever long enough, a fulcrum to place it, and I shall move mountains, right?
Yeah.
So it's all about leverage in this piece, right? So like I mentioned earlier, we work really hard to remove the toil and tedious work, of project acquisitions, right? So we could focus on the fun stuff, right? So one of our team members, once gave me, pretty candid feedback that some of the work can be pretty soul sucking, right? So now what we've worked really hard to do is get rid of all of that. We leverage agentic workflows and automations so that our team can focus on the highest and best uses of their time, which is like, again, meeting landowners face to face, right? Looking in the eyes and, closing deals. So, we get dozens of inbounds per week, and our team leverages the technology suite to be, more efficient and to allow people to do what they do best, which is convincing other people to do things. And
Right.
so, how do we do it is every single week we release new features that we're able to understand what our bottlenecks are, and we solve them over and over again until we get rid of those, right? And so then we could do the fun stuff, which is like meeting the people, getting out to the landowner's kitchen and negotiating contracts with them and their cat by their side. So that's how we got there.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate you explaining that. That makes sense, like creating systems and platforms, right? So that people could focus on, like, obviously convincing the landowner, right, to sign
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
LOI.
exactly. Like imagine, like Benoy, for you, you could just do podcast interviews all day long, right?
Yeah.
But the editing, the scheduling, the making sure the audio, everything is good, like all of that is automated. Then you can just focus on interview like you're doing now, which is me and you, right? Like that's the
Oh,
fun
for
part.
sure. Oh, it's
Yeah.
definitely the fun part for sure.
Yeah.
I got to work on my automation since for sure, and that's smart, obviously, to create, systems and use AI to focus on the things that add the most value, right? That you could replace. What does being a 10x developer actually look in practice when AI is integrated into the development process?
First of all, thanks for calling us a 10x developer. That's like what we are striving to be, right? So that's definitely one of our goals, right? But in my view, a 10x developer leverages technology to run the whole business and allows the team to do what cannot be replaced by technology, which is
Sure.
negotiation, right? Using intuition to execute, thinking strategically from multiple angles, understanding human interaction and, different how they think and how to move instinctively in a negotiation in real time.
Yeah, definitely.
So for being a 10x developer, I'll break it down to, I think, three sections. First one is project acquisitions and development. Two is monetization or commercialization. And
Sure.
three is the operations of the business, right? So we talked a lot about the first one, which is project acquisitions, right? So again, since the launch of Scout IQ internally a year ago in March, our team has acquired 2.7 gigawatts of high probability projects with a team of three, right? So, and we hire like midway through the year. So, but easy numbers, that's roughly, 900 megawatts to gigawatts acquired per person. So this isn't theory, like, because we're actually there from a greenfield perspective,
Yeah.
right? So Scout IQ and Scout IQ isn't just a siting tool, right? So we've built agents on top of it to keep those projects alive during development, right? So we've sort of already discussed real-time intelligence where it acts as our eyes and ears of development and letting our team knowing to understand the latest and greatest changes in planning and zoning, local moratoriums, community opposition, and property tax abatements, incentives, right? So anything can create a headwind or a window. And our team doesn't have to manually monitor 50 counties or municipalities. Our system flags what matters and our team acts on it. And that's a 10x in development. Right. So secondly, it's monetization, right? This very well, where project M&A is a slog, right? So it's
Yeah.
creating SIMs, managing data rooms, reaching out to investors, managing those relationships, responding to due diligence questions at 11 p.m. Like all of those are perfect use cases for AI to solve, right? So we're building internal agentic workflows that do the heavy lifting for project sales, so our team can focus on, obviously said over again, the actual relationship and the negotiation. So not like document management, right? So that's where the next wave of compression and leverage happens. And then lastly is operations, right? So I think this is like vastly underestimated when people start a business. So development isn't just site acquisition or getting permits. It's like running the business. So investor reporting, financial modeling, partnership communication, contract management, NDA management, right? So we're systematizing most of that, right? So we want a company to run on workflows and data, and so that we have the ability to diagnose delays and bottlenecks and build the next thing that helps us get to the 10x developer badge, if you will. So what I think a 10x developer and what it actually looks like in practice is this. Let's just see what it looks like, right? So,
Sure.
before a meeting, like a meeting with you, or a landowner or a project buyer, I kick off a workflow in a chat window in my agentic workspace, right? And then I'm fully present with you, talking to you on the phone and understanding your deal, start negotiating projects. And when that's done, I look back to my machine and three things I've already started to move forward and I'm ready for my next meeting. Right.
Oh,
So
it's huge.
yeah. So we are running parallel workflows that used to require parallel teams. Right.
Mhm.
So that's compression, that's leverage, and that's what we're trying to build towards every day.
Yeah, that's amazing because I think at a certain point, like I didn't think solar development was scalable, but obviously incorporating AI and your platform, it's showing that, you can make development scalable because there were just so many different variables. And obviously, you know, you have an AI solution in Scout IQ that could handle a lot of the things that come up within the development. And obviously, Palladium's a part of that process as well. So that's really interesting. With the rise of like AI and data centers, how is power demand changing the way you think about site selection and project development?
Yeah. So and we're definitely seeing change in many, many ways, right? So first and foremost, we have gone into data center development. I think the skill sets that we have from a power infrastructure developer perspective lends really well to data center development, right? So we're working with a co-location provider where we are their boots on the ground developer, getting permits, understanding the power piece, getting the site control, all of those pieces to move them to a place where data center developers can start to build and push data center project forward, right? So that's one thing that we're doing. But from our perspective too, we are now viewing projects from both a load and generation perspective, right? So let's just say, for example, in ERCOT, where you have probably the biggest data center market after Northern Virginia happening, right? We have to look at power and load when we site projects now, right? So that comes with a lot more data, a lot more understanding of how to move projects forward. And the ante is also increased significantly for these deposits, right? So
Sure.
we have to choose our projects in an intelligent way. I think the days of the bragawatt developer are probably over. I think we need to build our pipeline to be resilient with the understanding of both the power side and the load side. So that's how we're seeing things. We definitely want to be closer to load pockets, but load pockets can pop up anywhere now, right? So these data centers, use the same amount of power as a city would on a 24-hour basis. So again, that's definitely changing how we view and site projects now.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great point. And it's interesting just to hear your perspectives on, obviously using technology to simplify, development and how that's going for you. Looking ahead, like how do you see like AI reshaping solar development, data center development, storage development over the next, 3 to 5 years?
I think the development process as we know it today will be unrecognizable in the next like 3 to 5 years. I think we will all be still super busy, but the work will look very different. Instead of the toil, as I keep using that word, and the manual entry of data, it's going to be moving more towards leveraging technology to do those tasks while we do what humans do best, right? The authenticity that humans have will never be replaced by AI. And we're actually, as humans, going to crave that more moving forward, right? So I think, again, the work will look a lot different, right? So, but I do think teams that are manually doing what ScatterQ automates right now will either have to adopt a new way of execution or be outcompeted on like a speed and cost basis, right? So, I think there will be a bifurcation of the market where there's going to be a number of developers that will adopt agentic development methodologies to remove bottlenecks,
Yeah.
running, enormous high quality pipelines with lean teams, right? Other branch will be those who kind of struggle to keep up. So I think that's what's going to change mostly. But on the infrastructure side, I think AI is going to keep accelerating the demand for power, which creates a sort of compounding tailwind for the best positioned developers, right? So the developers who understand power development and AI tooling are going to have enormous edge. Yeah, that's the bet that Palladium's making.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's
Yeah.
pretty smart, and it's still so early, I believe, in the AI transition, even though I'm seeing a lot of, project development tools and the way you're incorporating it. And then you've created the platform for yourself that you're using, you know what I mean? The other software companies are not, made by developers and getting used by developers, which is a huge competitive advantage.
That's a really good point, right? So we are developers who developed a tool for developers to develop, right?
Yeah.
So we live and breathe the difficulties of that every single day. And this compounding of like learning and executing and building that cycle, if we do that every single week, the system is just going to grow better, right? So, you better yourself 1% per day. By the end of the year, you're 37 times stronger, right?
Oh,
So
amazing.
that's definitely how we approach ScatterQ and what we're building here.
That's really interesting. And then I know you were just at InfoCast, the Solar and Wind Investment Conference. That was earlier this week. Was there any key takeaways that you had from that conference?
Yeah, I think what's interesting about this conference was there were, I think, two groups of people, developers there, right? So one is people who are working on safe harbor for the ITC and getting ready for the new regime of project financing, right? So, and fiat was the term that was thrown around over and over and over again. We heard that through every dinner, every meal, every meeting, challenging environment. So, that's one group of people that we have spoken to. The other group is very excited about the next step of the renewables, right? So the worst thing that could happen to renewables industry happened, right? The ITC is going away, right? However, you look at other countries, ITC doesn't exist, but solar is still booming, right? So we are faced with this like inflection point where we have to cross this chasm where things are difficult to get to the next step where I believe solar plus storage, any renewable power is going to be bolstered by this immense increase in demand for electricity. So I think all that's pretty positive once we get past this, like I said, this chasm.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, the guidance for FIAC was February 12th. I think people are still trying to understand it. And then how many FIAC compliant suppliers are out there in the market now where they could meet the 50% threshold for 2026 is
Yeah.
probably slim and far between, especially as you get into like battery storage. I mean, still solar, it takes time, obviously, for supply chains to be developed here in the US. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, yeah. If I could wave a magic wand, I would build AI agents to develop a factory of robots to help us with the fiat issue, but sorry, that can't happen. Yeah.
Yes. But obviously I appreciate like the amazing innovation, that you're creating. And is there any like maybe trends that we haven't talked about that you think the community would be interested in, solar storage or data centers or, power consumption?
Yeah, maybe I'll have three maybe we talk about. So from an
Sure.
AI perspective, we hear a lot about agentic development and like what does that actually mean, right? So and if we're moving away from SaaS companies
Yeah.
because we're able to have all this technology at our fingertips, I think that is the next trend where you have developers, citing finance folks be also extremely AI literate and be able to, build automations like this on their own to solve their own bottlenecks. And I think that's one trend that will be happening. We are going to be able to build some of our in-house agents to allow folks to use as well on your own, Claude instance, if you will, a Claude chatbot. So that'll be coming out in the next few months or so. So I think that's kind of the next trend, right? Where these SaaS, we might be moving away from the SaaSification of development tools. And then from a renewables perspective, I think there's going to be a trend more towards people being interested in post ITC, post fiat world, right? So at InFocus, I'm also hearing folks, IPPs being interested in, 2029 CODs and onward, right? And
Interesting.
whenever we talk about later stage CODs, people get pretty excited. It's a simpler cap table. Yeah, so PPAs are going to be higher. It's interesting how the industry is now moving past like, hey, I'm pretty full on 2026, 2027. Let's look at what you have out there. That's fun.
For sure. And
Um,
I think I've spoken to like a large IPP and they were just happy, like maybe they don't want the ITC because all the costs related to legal, third-party consultants or accounting firms, advisory firms, and it's a lot simpler of a transaction. And with power prices going up too, like the case for solar and storage, the economics will continue to work. And as you know, solar is the cheapest form of, energy and the fastest to come online. And with storage, it changes the whole dynamic of an intermittent power source. And
yeah,
especially now with
yeah.
the Iran conflict and, fuel costs going up and you don't have to worry about, the Strait of Hormuz. are using
Yeah,
EVs or, obviously intermittent power sources.
right. That's very true, right? So, I think these AI large mega, data centers will start to generate power on their own, and solar and storage play a really big part of that, right?
For
So
sure.
intermittency of solar colliding with the ability to smooth out the energy and the voltage regulation and like the almost heartbeat like energy consumption from a data center, and it smooths it all out, right? So we're definitely headed towards a world where these data centers will have behind the meter renewable power.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's exciting, and there'll be an incorporation of, different technologies, microgrid, solar and storage being a key part of it. And it's interesting too how things are merging, right? Because like now a lot of developers are getting asked to, renewable energy developers asked to develop data centers, and obviously coming up with how you're going to use the energy, right? Or how you're going to generate or how much you're going to generate is becoming a big thing when it comes to data centers. And obviously, if they're able to do it behind the meter, it simplifies the whole thing for them. You don't have to deal obviously with the utilities or the different RTOs and all the complications related to that and how long things are taking to get
Oh yeah.
online due to permitting or interconnection or moratoriums and all these different things. So
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head right there, right? It's like the speed to power, right? So
yeah,
instead of
that's huge.
4 years in interconnection queue, it's, however fast we can put panels up. You
Yeah,
know?
definitely. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why I laugh because it's so simple. It's just panels, rackings, and inverters. But, the US is so overly regulated when it comes to new energy or new generation coming online, not just even renewables, compared to other countries. And like, look at China, like how much new electricity is coming online each year, which is like fractional compared to what we're doing in the US,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But I think we'll get there. I think you'll be hard pressed to find anyone in the solar and renewables industry that's not up for the challenge. I'm pretty positive about that.
Yeah, what's amazing is like the solar industry is extremely resilient and they adapt, and there's like so much creativity and innovation. You've been now in the solar coaster since 2009, which is amazing. You're one of the original solar mavericks out there. I appreciate, obviously you sharing the amazing work that you're doing with Scout IQ, and this is like a form of innovation. And being the 10x developer, I'm a big Grant Cardone fan, so you first have to say it to believe it for it to happen. So I appreciate you using that 10x developer. And I've heard obviously for a long time that development is not scalable, but like looking at your product, it is scalable, so
Someone once asked me, like, what do you think makes a successful development project? Right. It's the right people on the job. It's the right projects, the right area, but sprinkle in luck, right? Like that's
for
a
sure.
big part of it, right? And
Yeah,
what Scout IQ does, in my opinion, is stack the deck in our favor, where we don't operate, well, we have luck coming at us from multiple sides, right? So,
yeah,
we don't have to rely just on the ability to or fortune to bless us whenever the project moving through, right? So again, it's like removing that out of the equation and into a form of execution that helps us move forward, right? So sometimes it does feel like if you start a whole new greenfield team, you have no idea if you're actually going to get a project or not. You go through these campaigns and you may not be successful, right? But since the launch of Scout IQ and our ability to execute and putting in our developer intuition in code form, we've been able to get a 25% hit rate, right? So 100 mailers that we send out, 25 landowners call us back. And that's persistent throughout all of our campaigns.
that's amazing.
Mm,
That's a high response rate, I mean, for a mailer.
yeah, thanks. That's a metric that I tout very proudly.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it got my attention when we talked in the pre-interview. The other thing too, I was thinking just now is like for the amount of assets you have under site lease, right? You know how many people other companies would have their development team to have them, like, did you say 2.1 gigawatts? Is that correct? Or
Yeah, right now our team is actively developing a little bit over five. Our team is total 12 people, and then for our greenfield team, we acquired 2.7 gigawatts and with three people.
the three people? I mean, like, think about 2.7 gigawatts, like in the solar developer, like how many people you would need, you know?
Yeah,
I
no,
don't
we
even know how much. It'd be 4 to 5 times, maybe.
maybe 10x. Don't
It
know.
could be 10x. Yeah, it should be 10x. Sorry, I
Yeah.
apologize. Yeah, like, and then the cost, right?
Yeah.
I mean, of that 10x, like you're talking about, yeah, I mean, it's so much more, capital intensive, and then labor, right, is expensive. And then it's hard once you have that labor, right, on your balance sheet, it's hard if like things change, right?
You have to keep that team going, right?
Yeah,
So it doesn't matter how many projects you get, you have to pay that overhead, right? So
yeah,
if you engage us and use Scout IQ on your behalf, you could turn the spigot on and off for one. We hope you don't, because we're getting so many projects for you. But the cost for us is de minimis monthly perspective,
right.
and we're paid on a success fee basis,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
as they hit milestones, as the projects progress, as they hit NTP, that's how we are compensated, and that gives us an alignment of incentives, right? We are along with you for the ride. We want to make sure these projects are good from the beginning, so no one is wasting their time on projects that don't make it through.
yeah, that's a great, like, alignment of incentives, and I appreciate you talking about that. And this has been a great interview, Nobel. I appreciate you making the time. If our audience wants to learn more about you or Palladium, like, what's the best way?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the podcast. Anyone who wants to reach out to me to learn more about Scout IQ, you can go to scoutiq.dev or reach out to me on LinkedIn. Happy to chat.
Yeah, we'll definitely have it on the notes of the podcast. This has been an amazing interview. I really appreciate you talking about this publicly on the Solar Maverick podcast. I'm really excited about the product, and I'm curious to see how things continue to progress in the future. So thank you again, Nobel. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Solar Maverick Podcast. The Solar Maverick Podcast is brought to you by Reneu Energy. We're a solar development and consulting firm. If you believe that this podcast is adding value to you, please give us a 5-star review and share with those that you think could benefit from this information. Please email all questions, suggestions, and feedback to info@reneuenergy.com. That's info@reneuenergy.com. The Solar Maverick Podcast is produced by Podcast Laundry and executive produced by Benoy Thanjan and Kevin Y. Brown.